Coming up on this Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, it is superlative season. Summertime has arrived. Schools are letting out, and superlatives most likely to succeed, most likely to become president. How about for the Memphis Grizzlies? Most likely to be traded, most likely to become a starter over the offseason. We'll talk about that. Plus, take a look at the Mitchell Robinson fit, why perhaps there shouldn't be love in Memphis for that particular New York Knicks big. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes. We are a part of your team each and every single time an episode drops here on Locked On Grizzlies. I'm so happy to have you with me to start your week off the right way here on Locked On Grizzlies. No to Michael Cole, my co-host. This time around, it's just me flying solo. Hopefully you'll stick around and chat Grizzlies basketball with me for the next 30 or so minutes on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs in particular, which helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We are free and available here at Locked On Grizzlies wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing. Let us know how we're doing in the comments, wherever you are able to rate. We appreciate the feedback, and most importantly, each and every time an episode drops, we appreciate you joining us here on Locked On Grizzlies. DeMichael, the last time we were together, on the Thursday episode of the show, we had a 3-day weekend to end the month of May. DeMichael talked about John Conchar and Zaire Williams and some of these guys that are on the periphery, Santi Aldama, right? How are they going to fit? What's going on with them going into the offseason? While DeMichael was carrying the end of May, was celebrating graduation. I'm a teacher by trade. I believe we've talked about that a time or 72 here on the show. And it's superlative season, right? Graduation was this past Thursday for the school I work at, and there were senior superlatives most likely to succeed and, most likely to become an astronaut and all those kinds of things. They do teacher superlatives as well at the school that I work at, and I was voted most competitive. I have no idea why I would ever get such a distinguished honor to be called competitive. I don't know if that's true. You'll have to tell me if you think I'm competitive, especially if you followed my career over the last decade or so covering the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't know if that's the case. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But in reality, aside from my competitive streak, it got me thinking, what could be some superlatives for this upcoming Grizzlies offseason? So I'm predicting here what's to come. And maybe we can revisit this in September or so, how I did, because obviously the offseason hasn't really begun for the Grizzlies yet. There's been some coaching changes that we've talked about, but in terms of roster movement, Yuta Watanabe not opting into his player options really been the only major piece of the puzzle to be put in for the 2024-2025 Memphis Grizzlies. So I'm looking into my crystal ball, so to speak, and this one maybe isn't as bold as I think it is, and we've talked about it briefly here or there, but I'm going to plant my flag, as I like to say. I am sharing a pre-superlative for the Memphis Grizzlies most likely to be traded this offseason, and I think it's Marcus Smart. And I want to stress, because I've been a big Marcus Smart believer. We did an episode when the trade went down. I thought it made Memphis a title contender, and I still think the Grizzlies can be a title contender with Marcus Smart in the fold. I want to stress that. I would start Marcus Smart if he's still here, and I would ensure that if he's here, you put pieces around him to make him and maximize him into that kind of player. He's a 16-game player, like Draymond Green says. Right? That's a guy you want on your roster once the playoffs start. I believe that. We haven't seen this roster at full strength. I would happily keep Marcus Smart. But the reasons I think that Smart is the most likely to be traded this offseason are basically threefold. Number one, Smart doesn't necessarily fit the Grizzlies roster. Smart made more sense going into last season, the 2023-2024 campaign that just wrapped up and will finish for the entire league once the Mavericks and Celtics finals concludes in a couple weeks, if not sooner. Smart made more sense when you thought that he could play the point with Ja Morant out. But if anything was proven over that 6-19 stretch, it is what I feared going into that campaign, that Marcus Smart cannot be a lead point guard. He probably shouldn't be a point guard, period. He is a combo guard moving forward, and there's value to that. But the Grizzlies, if they don't need a big, they need someone who can help lead the offense. And from what I've seen over the last couple of years, I would rather Desmond Bane be that backup point guard, the de facto second point guard, than Marcus Smart. And that's concerning because if Marcus Smart can't be that lead facilitator, if he can't be that guy to help in that part of the process, that means he always needs to be next to Ja Morant or Desmond Bane, one of the two. It alters my perspective of him because of how poorly that went last season. That's reason number one. He's not a perfect fit in the roster. Number two, he probably has the most trade value of any of the guys we talked about. Because don't get me wrong, I'm the king of the trade machine, right? I love to go beep, boop, boop. John Conchar, Zaire Williams, Santi Aldama. Oh, put it all together with a couple of second rounders. Look, I just got Brook Lopez. But that's not necessarily how trades work in the NBA, right? In reality, you see some of those kinds of trades, but they usually involve a third team having those pieces get jettisoned. At any time that you add a third layer, it makes something inherently less likely. When it's a team-for-team trade, one-for-ones are a lot more common. And there are potential one-for-one deals to be had. We'll talk about Mitchell Robinson later on in the show. It would be harder with Mitchell Robinson because he makes closer to Luke Kennard money. Trading Smart for Robinson would have multiple players that would need to be added to make that money work. But Smart for Brook Lopez works pretty close to straight up. Smart for Jared Allen of the Cleveland Cavaliers works for pretty close to straight up. And both of those teams may have possible desires to use Smart as their lead starting shooting guard. Maybe Donovan Mitchell chooses to leave Cleveland. Darius Garland is your point. Marcus Smart is your two guard to help develop that young roster into winners. Damian Lillard is your lead guard there in Milwaukee. You want a partner in the backcourt who can impact winning without having to score. Marcus Smart will hit open threes, not as much as you'd like, but he can do it, and he can be a secondary facilitator. And if you have a true backup point guard, it allows for Smart to stay in that role as opposed to initiating offense on a more consistent basis. So with Cleveland and with Milwaukee, I see two relatively easy fits. Now, I want to stress, if you're going to be sending out number 9 overall in the 2024 NBA draft, maybe you do that for Jared Allen. I don't think you do that for Brook Lopez, maybe number 39 in this draft. And heck, it might be the Bucks that are giving you additional draft assets because Lopez is not as young. He's on an expiring deal as opposed to Smart, who's got 2 years left on his contract. I believe that there is malleability there in terms of how Memphis wants to approach it. And if you get Lopez, you bring him into the fold, you can start Brandon Clark, you can start Vince Williams Jr., you can start Gigi Jackson, whatever angle you want to go. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit on the show. But it makes for a better fit. And at number 9, you can take best player available. Maybe you do take a true point guard if Reed Shepherd's still on the board, or Dillingham from Kentucky, somebody else of that ilk. And now you've got someone who hopefully can play next to Ja Morant. But worst case, even if they can't, at least there's some more roster balance there. That would be intriguing to me. Or you can just take the best player available. You want to take Ron Holland? Makes a little more sense in that spot because now you've got Gigi Jackson being more perimeter based, or you've got a guy like Vince Williams Jr. being more perimeter based. You could use a more combo forward type, and you take the best talent in potentially on your board there because you've already addressed the big man issue. But roster fit, value in trade, those are some of the major reasons why I think Smart might be the most movable. And to be honest with you, the third reason, we haven't seen it all together, but it just seems like something's off, right? And I want to stress, I don't have any insider sources. DeMichael and I haven't necessarily talked about it that extensively beyond me saying it seems like the way that Smart is perceiving Memphis, maybe the immaturity of the Grizzlies, which was pretty prevalent, right? Ja Morant's actions, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, thinking the suspension was too intense. We can at the very least agree that he was immature. Maybe Smart wants to go to a Milwaukee or even a Cleveland because he thinks they're further along in that maturity process. I'm not saying he's right, but what if all that has transpired has soured Smart on the Memphis experience? That last reason isn't as solid as the previous two, but I do think there might be some weight there. There's something tricky in the fit beyond the on-the-court product. So let me know what you think. Do you agree that Smart is the most likely Grizzly to be traded this offseason? Do you disagree? If you do, give me a name. Let me know in the comments. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are going to talk about if Smart is gone, who do you slide into the starting lineup? The Grizzly most likely to start in Memphis. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's important to understand that it is not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion with a B professionals, which makes it the best place to hire, giving you access to pros that you can't find anywhere else. It does all that at LinkedIn while making the process easy and intuitive. When you have that many candidates that are quality, hiring can be easy. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. 2.5 million small businesses already use LinkedIn for hiring. What are you waiting for? Get in the game with LinkedIn and post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will be taking a closer look at who should replace Marcus Smart as a starter if he is indeed traded. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, flying solo on this episode. No DeMichael Cole. Miss him terribly, as I always do when he's away, but he will be back with us for our Tuesday and Wednesday editions of the program. Very excited to have that happen. And again, I'm kind of setting the table here. I think there's more to dive into with these topics for today's episode, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty over the next couple of days. But the first superlative, pre-superlative, that I handed out was Marcus Smart being the most likely Grizzly to be traded. Say Smart is gone. Who fills that void? Whether you think Smart should be a reserve player or not, whether he's in Memphis or not, maybe that's part of the conversation DeMichael and I have down the road. I think DeMichael has been on record saying that Marcus Smart should be a starter, and I agree with him for the record. If Smart is here, he should start. But in the superlative that I just handed out, the pre-superlative, Marcus Smart is no longer here. Let's just say it's Jarrett Allen. Okay, the Grizzlies gave up number 9 overall. They get Jarrett Allen in Memphis. That's a pretty big price to pay, but Memphis has that big man question answered. And now you have Jaren as your starting 4. If it was Brook Lopez, if it was another big that maybe is just a reserve type, maybe Brandon Clark's in the conversation. The reason I like the Jarrett Allen example isn't necessarily because I would do that trade. I think it's worth diving into more with DeMichael. I do think it makes the question a little bit clearer because you've got Allen as a starter, right? You've got Jaren Jackson Jr. as a starter. Desmond Bane starting at the 2, where you can argue he should be starting. Positionless basketball, all that, I get it. But you got Bane at the 2, you got Ja Morant at the 1. Who's your 3? Right? You could be asking that about the Memphis Grizzlies circa 2013 and 14, and you could be asking about the Memphis Grizzlies circa 2024. The 2 most likely candidates, assuming in this Jarrett Allen trade that number 9 overall is sent to Cleveland, the 2 most likely candidates would be Vince Williams Jr. and JT Jackson. And spoiler alert, you've heard me talk about this before. I'm on the side of Vince Williams Jr. in that particular scenario. Not because I think JJ Jackson stinks, not because I don't think JJ Jackson shouldn't get a lot of minutes. You could argue he'll get exactly the same amount of minutes as Vince Williams Jr. in the scenario I am playing out, roughly 25 or so a game. And JJ may close games. That's one of the other reasons I like this Jarrett Allen idea. Because JJ Jackson is clearly a better offensive player than Vince Williams Jr. is at this stage of the game. He has more scoring tools, especially in isolation. You give JJ the ball and watch him work, he can go to work for you. But as I have articulated here on Locked On Grizzlies numerous times, what makes me nervous is the fact that JJ Jackson is not a facilitator of offense. Does he make sense next to Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr.? I would argue he doesn't, and I have argued that he doesn't because of his lack of ability to facilitate. Meanwhile, we have seen Vince Williams Jr. facilitate time and time and time again. He is more than capable of being that guy. He has even run the offense, you could argue at times, better than Marcus Smart. I think I would also give the edge to Vince Williams Jr. in terms of defense, but that gap is not as sizable as the facilitation one is for me. JJ Jackson earned a lot of respect from me, for whatever it's worth. The way that he defended guys like LeBron James and the other top scorers of opposing teams as the season concluded. It obviously didn't result in winning basketball, but Memphis didn't care if they won or lost. They wanted JJ to develop. And to his credit, he didn't just develop as a scorer. He also developed as a defender. He just didn't develop as a facilitator. And that makes me nervous. And that, in the grand scheme of things, what is best for the Grizzlies roster? To me, what's best for the Grizzlies roster is for JJ Jackson to be that reserve, that sixth starter, if you will, in this scenario, where he is coming in and playing 25 minutes or so as a sixth man. And he is in there when a Desmond Bane is playing the point and Ja Morant is out. Or he's in there as a stretch four when Jaren Jackson Jr. can play the five, and you're playing that five-out offense that we're all theorizing about on social media. The arrival of new coaches like LaRoche. Does Memphis go more five-out? A player like Brook Lopez would make that a reality from the beginning. But we're talking about Jarrett Allen here. Jarrett Allen, not that much of a threat from beyond the arc. You put Jaren at the five, Allen comes out, and JJ could play the four, and that is much more of a reality. It's more malleable, it's more pliable if JJ is coming off the bench. I mentioned Brandon Clark earlier, and again, in this particular scenario, it doesn't make sense if Jarrett Allen is the center. But if Marcus Smart gets traded +9 overall for a wing, it could very well be Brandon Clark that starts at the four. And who could that wing be? We'll talk about it on a future episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I think that is something that maybe we lose sight of a little bit. That's a possibility. Memphis could go that route. It's not as likely as the clean fit of a big, as I've talked about. But it's possible if Memphis wants a better fit at the three that allows Bane to be the two. And again, there's not positions anymore. There kind of is, right? You have to have length. You have to have size on the perimeter. We see that in Dallas, and we certainly see it with the Boston Celtics going into the NBA Finals. Memphis would be at a disadvantage into a series with Dallas or with the Denver Nuggets because of that size differential. Same thing with the Oklahoma City Thunder as well, you could argue. So I would start Vince Williams Jr. because he would fit better next to Ja and Dez and Jaren, in my opinion, as a facilitator of offense, as a true fourth scoring option. JJ's not a fourth scoring option. That dude's a second or third scoring option, and he makes a lot more sense on this particular Memphis Grizzlies team if he is coming off the bench being that guy while one of the other scoring options is resting. And then if you need a bucket at the end of a game, JJ goes in, you take out a Jarrett Allen, you go five out. And that's a fun lineup to think about, isn't it? Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Vince Williams Jr., JJ Jackson, Jaren Jackson Jr. Wow. That's possible. And you want to talk about a five-out offense. That would be pretty difficult to defend. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe the answer is both. But then what do you do with a Jarrett Allen or a Brook Lopez? It gets a little more convoluted there. And that's one of the nice things about that Marcus Smart contract. There's lots of different directions they could go via trade. So unsurprisingly, I would start Vince Williams Jr. in this pre-superlative world A lot of you would probably start Gigi Jackson, and that's totally cool. I get it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Maybe you would go the Brandon Clarke route. I certainly could hear an argument for that as well. Or, on a future episode, we'll talk about a different type of trade. Maybe that 5-out vision becomes a little bit more realized. Coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies, Mitchell Robinson, Mitch Rob of the New York Knicks, has been brought up in potential trade ideas, I think at Bleacher Report, elsewhere on social media. I'll talk about why I'm not as sold on that trade idea next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, you'll notice that aside from being excited, because I get excited, I'm not yelling at you, dear listener, dear viewer, because this is not Fox Sports. This is not ESPN. This is Locked On Grizzlies, proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. And you come here for analysis. You come here for ideas, conversations. You don't come here to get yelled at, right? And if you like that, hopefully you do, you can go check out Locked On Sports Today next. That is the first of its kind on YouTube, 24/7 streaming channel, covering all the different great stuff going on in the world of sports. Obviously, the NBA Finals are approaching. You'll see a lot of Locked On Mavs, Locked On Celtics, Locked On NBA will be there as well, plus the NFL, NHL, MLB, literally any type of sports talk you could possibly want, streaming 24/7. It's not just on YouTube. It's also on Amazon and the free channels app on an Amazon Fire. Check that out. Locked On Sports Today. Go check that out after this episode has concluded. Speaking of this episode, it is brought to you by eBay Motors. Big fan of eBay Motors, and you should be as well. Passion, drive, patience, the formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die whip alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your car alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to United States customers. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, closing out the show, why I'm not a big Mitch Rob guy. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, closing out this Monday edition of the show without my partner. Commercial appeals to Michael Cole, phenomenal writer covering the Memphis Grizzlies as their beat writer over at the Commercial Appeal. He'll be back with me on our Tuesday edition of the podcast. Again, talking about some of the stuff I set the table for here. Does he agree with Marcus Smart being the most likely Grizzly traded? Is there a wing that maybe Memphis could tag Smart in 9 with, the number 9 overall pick in the draft? Is there somebody out there that would allow for Brandon Clarke to be the starter in our scenario that we talked about earlier in the program? We'll talk about that and plenty of other stuff on our Tuesday edition of the show. But I want to close out with Mitchell Robinson because his was a name. We talk about Isaiah Hartenstein a lot on this particular show. The rumors are that guy's going to make $20 to $25 million a year in free agency. Memphis is not going to be able to pay that kind of cash, right? Unless they do a sign and trade with New York for Marcus Smart. And for contract reasons, CBA stuff, that's extremely unlikely, next to impossible, if not impossible. So Hartenstein is almost certainly out. Mitchell Robinson, who's making $14 million this coming season, not necessarily out. The Marcus Smart fit, as I mentioned earlier, not as clean. Right? You'd have to add another salary if you are Memphis to make that money line up a little bit more cleanly, like a Zaire Williams. That would help. Or excuse me, if you're the Knicks, you would have to add some money potentially if you're not interested in taking up cap space, that sort of thing. Sorry for the mistake there. So you would have to add money if you're New York. Does it make sense for them to do so? Maybe not. I think that a Luke Kennard for Mitchell Robinson trade in terms of salary lines up a little bit more cleanly. And aside from Tom Thibodeau probably never wanting to play Luke Kennard, I don't know, even without the unlikely salary match, I don't know that Mitchell Robinson makes sense for the Memphis Grizzlies. And that might surprise you, right? Because I'm Mr. Fee Fi Fo Fum, right? I'm the guy who bangs the drum that the Memphis Grizzlies need a center in the worst way. I still believe that. But at the same time, dear listener, dear viewer, there has to be some level of understanding of what the number 9 pick can mean for Memphis and what bringing in somebody like Mitch Robb, who basically is Steven Adams in a lot of ways, as a rim protector. He's not quite the passer that Steven Adams is, but you could argue he's more athletic. Again, he is a limited offensive big. He's a very good rebounder, solid defender. He does a lot of good stuff, but if you traded away Steven Adams, why in the world would you bring in Mitchell Robinson, especially when you're sitting there with the 9th overall pick? And even if Donovan Clingan is gone, who, again, that's my guy, right? I'm a Donovan Clingan guy, unapologetically a Donovan Clingan guy. But I also don't know if I would trade up past 6 to get him. And in order to get to number 3 with Houston, that's probably going to take a pretty sizable haul that I'm not comfortable parting with for Donovan Clingan as a Donovan Clingan guy. So if Clingan's gone at 9, Zach Edey likely will be there. Khalil Ware, who DeMichael talked about last week out of Indiana, likely to be there. Those are 2 bigs at 9 that could make sense and could continue to move up draft boards as the draft approaches over the next few weeks. Does that make more sense than bringing in a Mitchell Robinson, who, even though his contract is descending, which is attractive, he goes from $14 million this coming season to $12 million or so in his expiring year, the year after, similar to Jaren's contract. That's attractive. That helps in terms of the money crunch that Memphis is experiencing. But if you moved on from Steven Adams, why bring in Mitchell Robinson? Especially when the matching of money would be tough. I think that's a fair question. If you draft a Donovan Clingan, there's questions about health. There's questions about three-point stretching. Those same questions exist when it comes to Mitchell Robinson. The major difference, though, is Donovan Clingan is going to be on a contract that is cost-controlled over the next 4 years, including 2 team options. Mitchell Robinson you have for the next 2 seasons. And you're paying Mitchell Robinson more in 2 seasons than you are likely paying Clingan in 3, or whoever you pick at number 9. It'll be close. But the fact remains, the cost-controlled aspect of this is significant. How that piece fits in terms of being developed under Grizzlies culture is significant. There's nothing to suggest that Mitchell Robinson would be a cancer. I'm not trying to say that at all. But for me, what makes the Mitch Rob trade ideas float away is the fact that Memphis already had a guy like that and they decided to move on from him. Jared Allen is younger. Jared Allen has more to give than Steven Adams did. And again, you could put Marcus Smart as part of that trade and it's an easier fit. Brook Lopez, even though he's an expiring contract, he fits the 5-out philosophy. He can shoot the 3. He gives you that option if that's the way you want to go offensively. Might hurt you a little bit defensively. He's not the defender that Allen or Mitch Rob are. But if your goal is to trade that pick, there's worse things you can do. Zaire, Conchar, and number 9 overall, does that get you Mitchell Robinson? Maybe. Give or take a million here or there. But what is it worth to you? What's the opportunity cost? Again, that strengthens you and you keep a Marcus Smart, but now you just lost that number 9 pick and you're trying to figure out how you're going to strengthen the reserve unit. Oh, by the way, you still need a point guard if it's not Scottie Pippen Jr. because of the Marcus Smart dilemma that we talked about earlier in the show. Robinson for Smart is not as clean as a Robinson for Lopez, Robinson for Allen, give or take draft capital exchanging. You have to give up 9 plus a couple of other contracts to get Robinson, makes it more challenging, and he doesn't necessarily make you better than you would have been if you just kept Steven Adams, give or take the movement. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I'm not as sold on the Mitchell Robinson trade myself, especially if it means having to give up 9 to get him. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. As I mentioned earlier, on our next episode, we'll dive a little bit deeper, see how DeMichael feels about these trade ideas. Marcus Smart for a wing upgrade. If you're going to tag 9 with him, what kind of players could theoretically be available? We'll talk about that and more on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you are liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Amazon, Spotify, Apple, literally anywhere there's podcasts, there's Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you're in every dare, each and every time an episode drops, you are with us here at Locked On Grizzlies. I am grateful. So is DeMichael. We had a wonderful May. It's going to be an even better June building up to the NBA draft here on Locked On Grizzlies. Until next time, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. Have a great Monday, a great start to your week, and we will catch you back here next time on Locked On Grizzlies. See ya.